Welcome to Confessions of an EOS Implementer, a podcast by Talent Harbor. We share unique stories of EOS implementers and the companies they've transformed to give you a rare glimpse into the successes and the challenges of the system in action. I'm your host, Ryan Hogan. Let's jump in. Hey, on today's show, we've got Dan Zawacki, a certified EOS implementer, well on his way to an expert EOS implementer. Also, the founder of Lobster Gram, the sale and distribution of Lobster's direct-to-consumer. When you think about direct-to-consumer businesses today, there's platforms like Shopify that anybody can have an idea and go launch a business. There's a landing page. Most of it's free. Dan started with this idea in 1986, and he eventually launched it in the mid-1990s. This was the time where the internet didn't even really exist, or at least exist in the capacity that it is today. And so we talk all about his trials and tribulations, growing Lobster Gram from 0 to 15 million bucks, how long it took him to get to 10 million bucks. We talked about his endeavors on QVC and the advice that he had gotten from Lori Grainer in the green room when he was incredibly nervous, and the successes that he had from those different types of distribution channels. And then one of the key takeaways that I had was why we keep going. And he talks about this idea of so many entrepreneurs, this 3 feet from gold, like you're almost there, but before you get there, you give up or something happens and you just have to push through. And I asked him, well, why did you keep going? And he was pretty candid in his responses, and I'll let you hear it in the show. But one of the other things we talked about success, and his whole thing was it's learning, it's luck, and it's will. And I took that to heart and put it in my notebook. Hope you enjoy the show. A great conversation, and Dan's an amazing human being. You started Lobster Gram. This was 1996, just trying to paint a picture. And you started shipping lobsters across the country. Is that correct?
Well, it was actually 1986 is when I came up with the idea, and crazy to even think about how long ago that is. And I had a real job at Honeywell when I got out of college, and I worked there for selling thermostats for about 4 years. And this came up with the idea of shipping live lobsters around the country. Like the world needed that. And I was 24, never have started any companies, but I thought, that's a good idea. There was Harry and David, Omaha Steaks, and that was it. And I would tell people that this is what I wanted to do. And I practically told everyone, and everyone said, that's stupid. And I'd be like, why? And then they go, if it was a good idea, it's that famous, somebody else would have did it already. And I was like, well, maybe they didn't think about it. And so it's kind of funny. I talked to my dad about it. I said, hey, I want to start this company, Lobster Gram. What do you think? And he goes, you don't have a mortgage. You don't have a car payment because I had a company car. And he goes, your girlfriend just dumped you 4 years. I go, thanks for telling me. And he goes, why not? Do you want to be one of those people, when you're 50, I'm 60 now, but that say, oh man, you read about that. Or I saw this on this website, this company, selling lobsters. Do you want to be that person? And I'm like, you're right. I'm doing it. So I kind of did a little on the side while I was working at Honeywell, and wrote a business plan, which was really a to-do list. And I had like 18 things to do, and literally like a little check mark. Like one of them was, how do you ship a live lobster and get it there alive? Duh.
That's the biggest question on top of my brain.
It sounds kind of easy, but it was really hard. And I failed probably 10 times doing it. One time, the first time I did it, I said, oh my gosh, I'll put it in a box and I'll put a chunk of dry ice in there and ship it. It seemed like a good idea. So I called my buddy in Florida. I was in Peoria, Illinois. By the way, this is where I started this, Peoria, Illinois. And I called my buddy and I said, hey, I'm going to send you some lobsters. He's like, oh, awesome. And little did I know that dry ice, when it evaporates or sublimes, is that it forms in carbon dioxide. And so probably within 30 seconds, I closed the box, the lobsters were asphyxiated, dead. And on top of that, they froze like rocks because it's 107 degrees below zero. And so when my friend got them, they were shattered. They were like, lobster pieces were everywhere. And so he called me and he's like, what kind of joke was that? Well, this is my new company. And he's like, well, it didn't work out too well. And then he told me, because, there was no internet back then. Couldn't send a photo just like you can right now.
So how were you, like, how were you taking orders? Like, was this people just hearing about it?
So it took me about 6 months to figure out how to do it. And then it took me another 4 months because I went to Maine to actually I just wanted to be the marketing guy. I didn't want to be, the guy doing the fulfillment, because there's companies that have lobster tanks and all that. So I go to Maine and Boston and I talked to 25-ish, 24, I forget what it was, people, dealers, the wholesalers, lobster. And I say, hey, I got this idea. I want to send like 2 lobsters, 4 lobsters, lemon, the butter, the bibs, the shell crackers, the cooking pot. I mean, all this stuff. Having a candle and a candle holder. And they would look at me. And then, again, they all said, that's stupid. They literally would say it right to my face. The Mainers, they're wild, man. They say what they want. I mean, they're tough. So anyways, I had to figure out how I was going to do it. And in the meantime, I was able to get on a radio show because that was how you got PR for free. And up until that time, I had sold maybe 5 Lobster Grams. I call those mercy sales because it was like my mom bought one, my uncle bought one, my best friend bought one. Everybody bought one that was like someone I knew. So I get on the radio station. I tell my boss in Peoria, this was in Chicago, the station, and on the checkout board, the whiteboard, that I'm going to make cold calls in Springfield, Illinois that day. And so anyways, I get on the air with this guy named Jonathan Brandmeier, one of those wacky zoo dudes, great guy. And I'm on for 12 minutes. I'm thinking I might be on for maybe a minute. Ended up selling 180 packages that day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, proof of concept. This is my first business. And it's like, I think it's going to work. So I ended up driving back to Peoria, trying to act like nothing was, I'm like so excited. And my boss called me in his office, like as soon as I walked in the door, and he's like, where were you? I couldn't lie to his face, but, I could to the chalkboard.
I mean, you were just on the radio. How could you say anything else?
But it was in Chicago. So it was, but my boss's boss was in a taxi, and the taxi drivers listened to the damn radio, who I happened to be on, and I was one of the top sales guys, so he knew me. And he called my boss and was like, what's this Zawacki dude doing? He's on the air selling lobsters. He's like, no, he's not. He's doing cold call in Springfield, Illinois. So anyways, he was really excited about it. He was asking me all these questions, how did you do that? So anyways, he's like, well, you signed this paperwork that you weren't going to do anything on the side, and I got to let you go. I'm like, what? And so that was that. And I called my mom and I told her what happened. And she's like, oh, honey, don't worry. You can have your old bedroom. That could be your office. And I'll have your dad. He'll park the car in the driveway and you can have that as your warehouse. And that's how it really started. Because that's where I found a lobster tank from a seafood restaurant that went out of business, which I bought for $50. And I learned how lobster tanks work. And so literally how I learned how to ship a package was just put them in a styrofoam cooler, which polystyrene, and then you put one of those blue ice packs there, not dry ice, because that's bad. For that, and then seaweed, and then I would ship them out FedEx next day air, because they had just come out with that a couple of years before that. And that's how I learned how to do it. And so in my parents' garage, I learned how to ship them, and I could do about 10 a day, and which was pretty amazing that people would order them. And then I eventually got a warehouse in Chicago because gotta have low overhead. And the company do $1 million in revenue. It took me 10 years to do it though, because I just totally bootstrapped it, everything. And a bank wouldn't give anybody money who was shipping lobsters in Illinois. That's a whole nother story about the banks. They were like, what?
I was reading your profile, and when it looks like when you exit, I'm not going to fast forward because we need to go through this entire journey because it's an incredible story. But one of the things that you said in there is like, I was thankful not to be dealing with banks and governments and other things anymore. So it sounds like there was maybe some pain points there.
Yes. So when we got to maybe, and I had never run a company, so it was really hard for me my big mistake was I just hired anybody who had a pulse. Hey, you look nice. You got a nice handshake. You're a friend. All right. Or you're a family member, which doesn't usually work out. And so but that's how I grew. And then we grew we were growing 30%. And when I hit about, I think it was around 5-ish million. So it took me 10 years to do a million. Took me 11 years to do 2 million. And I think it was like 13 years when I hit like 5 million. So the growth was crazy. So I had to work with banks. And there's some good banks out there, and there's not some good banks. And I kind of think of banks as they would lend you if it looks like it's going to rain outside or the weather is bad, they'll lend you an umbrella. But once it starts to rain, they want their umbrella. That's kind of how it went too, right? You're growing and growing, you're using a line of credit. And all of a sudden, at the end, you got too much inventory after the holidays, and they're like, "Oh, you owe us $400,000 because you're out of this covenant or that covenant." And then you'd have to come up and write a check, and it never would.
Were these generally big banks or smaller banks that you were working with?
Generally, are smaller ones, and then the bigger ones, which one I actually stayed with for the next 10 years. Wintrust worked out pretty well, and so that's a whole other topic, banks, though. But
well, your story resonates so much. Like just the little parts you've already told. When I started a company called Run for Your Lives, it was the first ever zombie infested 5K obstacle course race. So when you think about like Warrior Dash, Spartan Race, Tough Mudder, we created one of those, except it was with zombies. And with the radio, I was able. It was DC 101. I forget the host name. Anyhow, it was DC 101, but they were doing like Wacky Friday, and you could call with like anything. And so I called and I was like, "Hey, just heard about this event that just launched that like zombies chased you." They put me right on the air. Of course, I wasn't a part of the event. I just happened to stumble on this thing, and we wound up selling a crap ton of tickets. And so like the product market fit of like putting it out there and seeing like who comes back, like there's this validation when it's not people that are in your circle. Like, hey, I've had the same partner, generally speaking, throughout ventures that have actually scaled. And him and I always know when we have product market fit because it's not our mom or our sister or our best friend that's coming through on the purchase. And then I'd love to get into some of these hiring things with you because we went through the same thing. The first thing we did was we hired all of our friends, and that was almost as bad as hiring family members because it busts relationships once you really start to understand like what you need in those roles, and you have to start making tough decisions. But like, how did you know what you needed when you had like, it sounds like you started hiring, but how did you know like what you were hiring them to do?
Yeah, that was probably the biggest problem is I just knew I needed people as opposed to roles. So I had everything in my head, all the processes. So you hear about there's visionaries out there, and then there's like presidents or integrators, the people get the stuff done. I was the visionary person. I was going to start a lobster company in Chicago, Peoria, right? And when I would hire people, I'd be like, oh gosh, we're growing. I need customer service because we did our own phone calls. Because back then, I mean, websites, they didn't come out. So we were one of the first, when that came out, this is a funny story. When it first came out, the World Wide Web, WWW, I'm like, oh, that's just another scam for marketing dollars. Because I was print like 1 million catalogs, and that was expensive. And then you come on with this, I couldn't even grasp how this could even work, a website. And at the time, so I'm like, okay, I better check into it. And again, my dad, smartest guy, he's like, get this thing called the, URL and get Lobster Gram. I'm like, oh, geez, $100 for that? Oh, I did. And I got livelob.com too, as our phone number was 1-800-LIVE-LOB, which is kind of a phone number. And anyways, trying to just hire people, right? This website thing comes and you're just like, okay, now I got to build this website. Oh, crap. What is that? And how do you do that? And so we were one of the first people actually to do, have a website. And I'll never forget, it was $110,000 for the shopping cart. because we're customized. Now Shopify just comes with it. It's free. And so that was a good barrier to entry anyways. But nonetheless, we did our catalogs, and that was like a 48-page catalog. It was a beautiful catalog. And matter of fact, that's how I met my wife. She was a photographer. I swear, there's so many of these stories that just lead to other stories. But, after 30 years of doing it, it's wild. And, but when you get back to hiring people, that was one of my big issues. I was horrible at hiring. Horrible. And consequently, you'd hire somebody and hire somebody else, and they didn't know their roles. And they were always like battling with each other, or they were they were doing the same thing. And you'd be like, okay, why are you guys doing the same thing? Or like, because you told us to. Well, I did. Sorry. Well, don't do that anymore. You're doing this. But I've learned a lot about hiring. That's for dang sure.
Because when you first started out, you sound a lot like me when it comes to marketing. Like I like to think of big ideas. I can market, I can sell, but I don't like all the other stuff. Like I don't like the details. I don't like the operations. I don't want to put lobsters in a box. Like I want to pay someone else to do that part. And I've been very fortunate. The partner that I've had throughout several of these ventures has always been the creative side. So like I'm like, hey, we're going to go do this. And he figures out like what the product looks like and how to put it together. But one of the first things you said here was, I didn't want to put lobsters in a box. You obviously figured it out, but it sounds like you did start putting lobsters in a box. Like you built a company around this instead of outsourcing that part.
Yeah, because it was really, I just didn't know any better. And when you got $1,000 too to start it, it's like, you can't really pay too many people to do anything. But I was always for whatever reason, I was always good at, getting on TV, getting in the radio, free guerrilla, PR. And I was on like 50 stations before they actually figured out that, they should probably charge me for commercials. And at that time, I had enough with the sales where we're actually making a profit and we could do that. And we eventually were on over 800 radio stations in a year, because we were very cyclical. It turned out, I thought this whole thing would be, you would send something to somebody as just a gift, but it turned out it was more holiday gifts, Mother's Day, Father's Day. So we were very cyclical, which was also, it's a tough business, that retail end of because, the cash flow is going up, goes down, and all of a sudden Christmas comes and you're like, oh, this is awesome. And then, you gotta boom, you start spending all the cash. So cash flow management was a big deal. But I was originally thinking that it was just going to be this flat line, sales would be, same. And that was hard to hire too, because all of a sudden we did 50% of our sales in October, November, and December. And that was nuts. Because, you had two types of processes. You had your processes for non-holiday, and you had the hiring, we had about 40-ish people. And then all of a sudden the holiday would come, and then we'd have that second set of processes to handle, that volume. And then we'd have over 100, 110 people that we'd hire to answer phones, because we had our old call center, and then pack. Eventually I bought a warehouse in Maine, big 20,000 square foot facility, which was a lot of fun. It was fun building that.
And how do you, because like the thing that I keep thinking about here is, especially as you talk about the seasonal nature of the business, like we're not talking about widgets. Like you're not going to Shenzhen buying a whole bunch of bulk stuff and getting it shipped over. Like you're dealing with something that is very much alive. And so how do you deal with the seasonal aspect with like keeping lobsters alive long enough and having enough of those lobsters to fulfill the demand?
Yeah, well, that was the tricky part. And that's when we really needed to build our own warehouse in Maine. And so what I did is I just went to all the different shows. It's actually called the Boston Seafood Show, and they have seafood and lobster. And so I would go and I would meet all the fishermen and the dealers and the wholesalers. And I found this one guy, he was just great. And he just loved the whole concept, and we hit it off. And he turned out he owned the largest live lobster dealer in the world. And so he would, show me, hey, go talk to this guy. He'll build you a lobster tank. And so we built tanks in our place in Maine, and we could hold like 10,000 lobsters at a time. And so we also had a freezer that could hold 150 pallets, because then we started getting into frozen, the tails, and of course, surf and turfs, just those natural things that you added on, and desserts, right? So people could say, hey, I want a surf and turf, and, why don't you put a dessert in there? And, and we would add corn and potatoes too. So we would ship people dinners. And so literally almost every package became custom, because we a custom package. So because people could do whatever they wanted to it. And that was one of the secrets to our success. It wasn't just here's one package or two. We had a whole slew of them that people could do. And it was pretty amazing, though, to be able to. I've always been one of those people where in my mind, I could connect the dots. Like I say, okay, if I'm going to ship a lobster, I got to do this and then that. And then I'd hit the brick wall and go, oh shit, I'm not going to do that. Back up and go, okay, I'm going to go here. I want to go there. And then boom, you're like, oh my gosh, I did it. And I just always had that quality. And, a lot of people, right, and I think that's one of the biggest problems with entrepreneurs is they're right there at the cusp of, the mountain and their idea, and they give up because of something. And if they just would have lasted maybe another week, another month, sometimes a day, they could have had a company.
Well, I'm sure you thought about this though, as you were going, because entrepreneurship, highest of highs and lowest of lows. And so when you're in those lows, why didn't you quit? What was there just some uncommon belief that I can see it, I know we're going to get there? Or was it just well, we've come this far and there's no going back? What continued to drive you through some of those pivotal moments?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess I would say the fear of failure. That was always one of the driving forces for me as an entrepreneur, was that, I got to do it. I've told everybody I'm doing it. I got to make this work. And a lot of luck, you started businesses, there's a lot of luck involved. And a lot of it is just pure will, I'm going to do this, and learning from all your mistakes. And as you said, holy crap, I made, there's the good, the bad, the ugly. And then when I say the really ugly, where you kind of just forget about it because you're like, I just spent $50,000 on that and I'll never use it again. Yes.
Yeah. We sunk cost is hard, and it's hard to stop doing it once you've already done it. We invested about $2 million into a software technology. Basically, we built our own Shopify because we felt like we needed that. And looking back on it now, even as we were going through the process, we were like, this is becoming too complicated. But we just kept going because it's really hard to stop, because you're like, well, we already have $500,000 in it. We need to keep going.
I had that same experience because nobody had built the kind of software that did the things we needed to do. So one of the things that we did that was one part of the success was we let the person pick the day they wanted their Lobster Gram to arrive. And so most companies did it the exact opposite way. They're like, okay, we're shipping it on this day and you'll get it, whenever you get it. And so we worked backwards. And we literally spent $2 million on the software to do that, and had to scrap it because it got so complicated, and there were so many bugs, it just didn't work. And that was brutal. That's one of those ugly of the ugly things. And then finally, I'm like, that sure would be nice to have that right now. But nonetheless, you live and you learn. And we ended up, there was a software that came out. And so we did a little customizing of it, and that thing lasted a good 10 years, and we didn't have to really do a whole lot with it.
Yeah, it's great to hear you talk about personalization, because personalization is one of the hardest things to scale. But there's a couple things that you've said during this conversation, which is one, you allowed them to select the date, and two, they could build their own meals. And so they could take a lobster and a potato and a steak and have a very customized experience. And the reasons that most companies don't do that is because it's incredibly complex once you start really growing it. And we had something similar. So I had a company called Hunt to Killer. We recently just sold it. But we had this subscription pipeline. And so maybe about, I don't know, 2 years into it, we started to have a lot of copycats enter the industry. But one of the things that people could do with our experience is expedite their next episode. Because all people want to do on Netflix and everywhere else is like binge through the season. And so for us, you could get your next episode in that season just by the push of a button. And the problem is it kept jamming a system that we were using. So we were like, oh, well, we'll just go build our own because it's very simple to build your own software. And then we had a software that did like that one specific thing very well. And it left behind the 80% of the other things that like we just took for granted with the, with the Shopify platform or whatever we were on at the time. So yeah, painful experiences.
Software. I thought developing a catalog was hard. What do they? But, that's nothing like this whole software to websites, pay-per-click, whoever even heard of pay-per-click, right? Back then it was like, what? It's a scam.
Yeah. And what, like, when you think about like hitting a ceiling, I'm sure you hit a lot of ceilings throughout, and some of those might have been like, as you envision where you're going, you're kind of navigating, you hit a brick wall and you make it to the next. But like at what point, you've talked about visionary, you've talked about integrator, you're the visionary. At what point did this all start to click for you of like, one, I need someone to like execute or really help take my vision? And two, like we keep hitting this ceiling and like we need something to help kind of organize this operation.
Yeah. So it was about 5 million in revenue. Everything was just sailing along. It's all good. And then for whatever reason, now what I do, it happens every company. I hit the ceiling, and I hit the ceiling in my people. It was just, they were over their skis. I also hit the ceiling in processes. All these processes that I had like taken for granted because they had worked, they were working pretty darn good when we were shipping, maybe 50,000 packages a year out or something like that. But for whatever reason, when we had more than 50,000 packages, we needed a bigger warehouse, we needed different processes, we needed just everything, different people, skills. And so I remember I talking to, she was my wife, the photographer. We got married, and I was talking to her about this, and she goes, you know what? You need a president. She goes, you got all these ideas, you're doing everything. She goes, you need a president. And I'm like, okay, I think I do. I need a number two. You can call it a president. I need someone to like get shit done. And so I hired a guy, Mike Robinson, and we had a great run together. And he was an attorney, and he wanted to get out of that rat race. And so we met, and it was a huge hire for me. It was like the biggest hire because everybody else what I did is I created minions. I didn't let people do stuff. I was always saying, do that, you got to do this and this. And that was led to part of the hitting the ceiling at around 5 million. And he was much different. He would be like, okay, we need to like structure, we need someone who's going to be just solely responsible for accounting. And they're going to just focus on accounting and not packing lobsters and then, do a little accounts payable later. And then we need a person who's in charge of operations. So if anything happens in operations, it's their responsibility to fix it, not yours. And we just put structure into it. And my whole role was then really to just find new markets. We also got into the corporate world where that was great. Instead of someone buying 1 or 2 packages, it would buy 100, 500. Crazy. And then I decided one day I was clicking channels and I saw QVC, a home shopping network. I'm like, oh my God, it'd be great to get on there. So I called them up, and then they're like, oh, okay, come on out. And I was like, wow, that was easy. And so we were on there for probably a good 7 years. I have the largest lobster TV sale in history. We did over $2.2 million in one day in lobsters.
Holy crap. And was this you? Like, did they give you the opportunity to go on the floor and sell?
Oh yeah, that was my deal. I wanted to do that. That was fun.
I've got to find this clip. I'm after this conversation, I'm going to go and try and find it. That's awesome. What was that experience like?
Scared the shit out of me is what it was. The first, I'm serious, boy. You go to QVC school for like 3 days, and I was so bad at it, they made me take it over a day. because I was so nervous. It was so bad. I don't know why. And then Lori Grenier, who in Shark Tank, she was on there, and she was saw how nervous I was in the green room, and she's like, "What do you sell?" I go, "Lobsters." And she goes, "Oh my gosh, there's never been anyone selling lobsters on QVC." And she said, "How long have you been doing this?" I go, "Well, 10 years." And she goes, "Well, just think of it this way. You know more than 99.99% of the people watching TV about lobsters. You're the expert. So go out there and act like it." I'm like, that's the best damn advice I ever got from anybody. And every time I went on QVC, I would always think of her and what she said. She actually became a customer too. It's really cool. Yeah, she is so nice. And so QVC was a great experience. I was on there over 500 times. And, you know, as they say in Maine, we sold a lot of lobsters, and it was fun. But, you know, after a while, it was just getting to be a little monotonous. But it gave me a lot of good skills to get on other stations and things like that.
So now you have found your number two. You're not calling this number two your integrator, because you might not even have known EOS existed. So you're either calling him your number two or your president at that point. Did things ever break again, or was that the magic and you were like, we're off to the races all the way to 2017?
No, things would break a lot. You know, it seems like once you hit the ceiling, you go for a little bit and then bam, you hit the ceiling again. And you get it in so many different ways. Your processes, your people, you know, your people who are good at a certain point in revenue or, you know, units sold. And typically it's one of those things, or markets change. Lobster prices were very volatile. And one time lobster prices just went through the roof. And so we had to really raise our prices up. And that gave us a big hit, because all of a sudden, you know, there's around $100. Now it's like 125. And, you know, just all those different things. One time we had a giant snowstorm. We were by Portland. And we had 2,000 packages in the belly of this FedEx aircraft, and all ready to get delivered the next day for Christmas gifts. And it was a bad snowstorm, but they assured us that they were going to still be able to take off. Well, they never took off, and it stayed on the tarmac the whole night and the next day. And so we had to call 2,000 people and tell them they're not getting their packages. And I think we lost over 600 orders. We had to give back people their money. That was our guarantee, you know, 100% satisfaction. Because people didn't believe you could get a live lobster in the mail. They were like, you can't do that. And so I had to come up with a guarantee that, yeah, we can, and we'll guarantee it. So that was a very, very expensive day. But we, you know, every business has their bad things that happen, and you just got to plow forward, and, you know, work and try and learn from them.
And at what point did you discover EOS, before or after Lobster Gram?
So it was about 2012-ish. So it was fairly new. And I met a guy who was one of the first EOS implementers. He happened to be from Chicago, and he spoke at a conference. And I thought to myself, wait a second, there's actually a system to run your business on, and it's not just having a meeting, right? Because that's how we ran our company, Lobster Gram. Hey, our sales are down. Oh, we better have a meeting. Hey, our sales are up. Wow, we should have a meeting and find out why. Well, we ran out of inventory. We better have a meeting. You know, it's just everything was a meeting. There was like really no planning, certainly no more than a month out. I mean, during the holiday, yeah, we planned a couple months out. But I learned about this. So I read the book, Traction, which is right behind me there. And I thought to myself, well, dang it. If I just started a lobster company in Chicago, I'm smart enough to read a book and implement this system at Lobster Gram. So, another stupid move. So I thought, oh, this is going to be great. So I did all the stuff, but I did all the easy things, right? And the hard things, I'm like, that's too hard. We don't need to do that. And there was nobody telling me, you know, no, you need to do this, Dan. And so it literally failed. I couldn't get anybody I had like a 5-person leadership team at that point, and I couldn't get anyone to get behind it. because they're all like, oh, it's just Dan. He's going to read another book and then we'll do something else next month. But I was like, holy crap, there's a system to do this. And so, it was always in the back of my mind. And I always loved being a teacher. And when, being on so many radio stations, and I did a lot of live reads myself, doing all this TV. I mean, we were on ABC, did stories on us, CBS, CNN, MSNBC, and then all these radio, just crazy amounts. And when you get on all that free stuff, other entrepreneurs would call up and say, hey, how'd you do this? Or how'd you do that? And I would always get a big kick out of helping them out and tell them what we did. And, that's what EOS is all about is, helping people get what they want from their businesses. And that's what the whole book Traction was about in the Entrepreneur Operating System. And so I was immediately just like, God, I got to do this. And so then life goes on, we're growing and, I'm making a ton of money and taking 5-week vacations and doing all this stuff, cars, all that. But then I'm just like, I'm 55. And I remember thinking, I'm driving to work and I'm thinking to myself, because we had an office in Chicago and the warehouse. And I remember thinking to myself, what am I going to have for lunch today? As opposed to thinking about my business. And all of a sudden it went, oh my gosh, I think I'm getting bored of this lobster business that I created with my own hands that I loved so much. And I had really thought about it for a couple months. And I talked to my wife about it. And then around in 2016, the end of it, I was like, I'm done. We didn't have the best year ever. I had a lot of inventory left over in my bank at the time. They were like, oh, you're out of this covenant because you have too much inventory. You're going to have to put in, $750,000 to shear up the line of credit. And I'm like, oh, are you freaking nuts? And so that's when I'm like, I'm out. And of course, when you tell the bank you're out, they're like, wait, no, we're just kidding. I go, no, I'm out. I'm sick of this. And by that time we had, a lot of people. And I just kept thinking of EOS and I wanted to simplify my life too, where didn't want all those people recording to me and all that responsibility. And so I decided to sell the company. I thought it was going to take maybe a year, maybe 2 years. And so I talked to my 2 biggest vendors, told them, and holy crap, within, I think it was 100 days, I was out, gone. No earnouts, no nothing, got out on my terms. And the company that bought it, they're doing a great job. They're capitalized, which helps. And I thought I could be a really great employee because I had hired thousands of people. And so they said, yeah, stay on for a year. I signed this year-long contract. And after a month, I'm like, this is the worst decision I've ever made. I suck as an employee. It's just horrible. So we were at one of our weekly board meetings, and I'm, trying to talk, and no one's listening to me because they're like trying to do the things that I know that didn't work because we did them. But they're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to do this. We're going to do that. I'm like, suck. I may be like a little kid and raising my hand. So finally, I just get up and I close my book up, the little bag up. You know what? I'm resigning. I'm out. Everybody, what? I go, yeah, I'm out. I'm resigning. And the HR guy, this is hilarious. He goes, you can't resign. You're quitting. I go, I'm not a quitter. I'm resigning. Well, what's the difference? And I go, because I'm not quitting. I'm resigning. And so anyways, turned out they treated me very well. And, but that was it. And, I spent a little time, I called it my quest of what I wanted to do, because there's a couple opportunities, when you're an entrepreneur like yourself, right? There's people that are always asking you, hey, you want to help us start this, or you want to be part of this? So I had all those opportunities when people found out I was selling it. And so I went on a backpacking trip for like 5 days up in the Apostle Islands with my dog. And it was like this 12-mile trek. And I had this little book to write all the things I don't want to do. And then I went back and I wrote all the things that I wanted to do. And so the EOS, being an EOS implementer, is what I'm doing now, that's just kept coming back. And so that's what I decided I was going to do. Because I tried to retire for about a month, and that's not, it's good for some people. It sure wasn't good for me. Got, you get into a lot of trouble. At least I did. No connections, but a lot of free time isn't good for me.
Me neither. That's yeah. I was on my journey. What did you call it? Your journey? Your search?
Call it my quest. I called it a quest.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It was a quest.
My quest lasted all but like 3 weeks, and I just couldn't sit still. So go ahead. Oh, so when you think about our stories are so similar because we self-implemented as well, and we were like, oh, we got this, and we took bits and pieces from it, and then and that was probably maybe around like the 5 to 7 million mark, and then we got to maybe about 15 million, and then I was like, we can afford it now. Like, let's go get a professional implementer. And this was maybe like 2 years later. And so we got Margaret Dixon out of Boulder, Colorado, and she was like, what the hell are you guys doing? And so what was great is like, even part of the system, like, you're operating better than you were, but the company had the opportunity to go through 2 transformations. And the second was even better because that missing like 30% or maybe 25% is like 100% different than how you were operating. Did you ever get a professional implementer, or did you guys self-implement, do all of those things as self-implementing?
Yeah. So we self-implemented for about a month. And so I wouldn't even consider it was self-implementing, but I fell in love with it. But I wish I would have hired someone to do that. It would have been one of the best things I ever could have done. Probably would have got many more multiples, for my business. But just it didn't work. That was my journey. Didn't work. But I knew that's pretty much what I wanted to do. There were some other things out there, but so that's what I do now. And it's funny that you mentioned that because I do work with a lot of companies that are self-implementing, air quotes, because I've never met one that actually is doing it well.
Well, we all think we are until we come see one of you guys.
I go, what is that you're doing? That's not EOS. So like, oh yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I'll be like, no, it's not. So I've been doing this since 2017. I've got like 400 and I think I just did my 454th session and I've seen everything, it's crazy. When I hit 500 sessions, I'll be an expert implementer, which I'm really excited about. That was one of my 3-year picture. That was one of my things I wanted to do. So it's pretty cool to, actually plan it, execute it, and get it done. Because that's what EOS is all about. Visualize it, get everybody on the same page, and then plan it, and then start executing it and having people be accountable. And that was one of the problems I had at Lobster Gram, is I thought I would tell someone to do something, and I would just think, okay, they're going to do it. Well, guess what? Most of the time we never did it. Or the way they heard Dan say to do it was they always call it Dan speak. And so they would totally do it wrong. And typically it was usually my fault.
Just to make you feel better. Derek, the business partner that I've had through various startups, he calls it Hogan speak. And so he was always the decipher. That's like we're basically like the same human. The mistakes that we've made, the Hogan speak, right. Like he would be able to decipher because I've known him since 3rd grade, but like I would say something and then walk out of a room and then he would stand behind to like interpret the things that I was really talking about. So,
so that's my president, Mike. He was really good at that. And he was also really good at saying, Dan, no, we're not doing that. That is not going to work. Or he'd be like, oh my God, that's a great idea. We can definitely do that. So my executive assistant now, Lindsay, she's so awesome. She can speak Dan. And so it's a blessing when you can actually, sometimes it's really weird. Maybe you get this too. It's like, you can almost see your thoughts being spoken. And in my mind, I'm like crystal clear on it. Everybody else like looking at like, but EOS is totally, the interesting part is EOS is giving me that realization that I catch myself now. And that's, one of the things, if people couldn't understand me now, it'd be a hell of a lot different. So it's really interesting to be still a visionary, but now I'm a teacher. I can teach people. So I speak what I call visionary very well. and I could spot a visionary like a mile away. Yes. You know what I'm talking about. We just think different. And when you're a kid, people would think you're screwed up or something. You're like, what's he talking about? Oh,
Yes. Oh, always the odd one. I'm at the Naval War College right now as a part of my reserve duties and taking some classes, and we had to do all these like personality tests, everything from like MBTI to Hogan's assessment and everything else. And my results are always completely different. And one of the instructors there, Gene Anderson, he pulled me aside and he was like, hey, most people like you don't stay in the military. The reason that you are different than everybody, like the way that your mind works or the way that you think about things, is because people like you don't stay in the military. Like you don't like structure. And so it's very rare that you're here at this mark, not because you're better or you're worse or anything else. You're just, it's different. And it's because the military usually weeds people like you out because you just don't conform. You don't conform to the system. So yeah, I hear you on that. It's always been like that. So
yeah, but it's interesting is with EOS, the process, it's structured, but it's also tailored for, each organization. So you can customize it. And that's why I think I love it so much. I mean, if there was only one way, boom, 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 I would probably be like, after a week, I'm out of here. But every time I meet, every client's different, every session's different. And so it's really cool to be, see that in every company and be able to customize it. And I think that's one of my super abilities is be able to take EOS and really, tailor it using the process, but using those tailored to the organization that you're working with, which is pretty cool.
Do you take clients anywhere, or do you really focus on local clients and kind of bringing them to you and being in a physical space?
Yeah, so I have a great session room in Chicago, up in North Chicago in Wilmette. Love it, fun. Got a little basketball net in there, and it's got I got Nerf guns in case things get really heated, because sometimes those get really heated, those discussions. And so I'll just have people do a duel as opposed to trying to, we're just like fighting session, because you get two brothers. Sometimes it gets really out of hand. When I try and have people come to my session room, I do have several clients that are all over the world. And so we'll do basically, Zoom calls, Zoom sessions. I have somebody in Argentina, somebody in Miami, another person in Chicago, and then a person in Colorado. And so we're all together on the screen, and we do the EOS sessions there. So sometimes then I got a couple clients that are just out of state and they want to use me. And so we just, I have a couple that come and visit. They'll spend the night and hang out, build a little team health, and then we'll get together. Or others that we just do a Zoom call for the day. So it's whatever works for, the client. Whatever's best for them.
So you take, because I know some people are particular, and the reason that I just wanted to clarify that, because my next question is, if someone just listened to this and says, I need visionary Dan, I need some Dan speak in our lives, and I want Dan to come help me with our business. I wanted to make sure that if you were only focused on local, we didn't have somebody from Louisiana calling you. So if someone's interested in connecting with you, how would they find you?
So they call me, 847-814-4123. That's my cell. Or you can email me at dan.zawacki@eosworldwide.com.
Awesome. And then last question for you. If you could have a beer with any implementer, who would it be?
Only one? Only one beer?
Yeah.
I would say Jill Young, who is the head coach of EOS, who I just love, and is just so happy, smart, joyful, so much knowledge in EOS. I would think it would be Jill Young. She's great.
Sweet. Well, thanks, Dan. Thank you so much for spending an hour with me today and recording this amazing conversation. I've got a whole page of notes now, which is great for myself and my own self-learning. So hopefully there was nuggets out there for everyone. But just wanted to thank you again for taking the time and coming on.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a riot. And literally, if anybody just has a question about business and they want to call me, I'm more than happy to. One of my core values is here to help, and I really take that to heart. So I love EOS, and I love turning people onto it because it's so powerful.
Confessions of an EOS Implementer is brought to you by Talent Harbor. To find out more about Talent Harbor and our fractional services and talent search solutions for businesses that operate on EOS, visit talentharbor.com. And then make sure to search for EOS Implementer in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Talent Harbor, thanks for listening.